Hello and welcome to Birth of a New Dimension. My name is Aurora. This recording is being created on October 8th of 2016, on October 7th of 2016, it's the day before my 15th anniversary of walking into this human form, and it's also my 100th episode of this particular Birth of a New Dimension radio broadcast. And I had intended on doing like a celebratory, fun and uplifting recording. However, when this day rolls around, I gotta tell you guys, I'm gonna get really personal now, because I never feel like celebrating this day. For the first couple of years, maybe the first 5 years or so, I just would ignore or deny that October 8th even existed. It is the death day of this body, and it is literally the memory of the worst thing that I've ever experienced or that has ever happened to me. The most uncomfortable, traumatic, and unpleasant experience I have ever gone through. It is not really a day that I feel like celebrating. And, people sometimes ask me about my birthday. I do celebrate a birthday. I celebrate July 26th, which is the, birth date of the corporeal body that I'm in. October 8th doesn't feel like a fun, happy, celebratory day for me. October 8th is the day that the woman who used to have this body lay down on her couch for a little nap after coming home from visiting her family members and essentially never got up. And it wasn't a natural death. This is a murder. So now you have to understand why I have such heavy feelings about this experience. And we really need to honor the person that used to be here and not sweep this under the carpet or pretend that it didn't happen. And I'm lucky and grateful that I have this body. And this body has been through so much, and it has been so difficult and so challenging for me to actually inhabit this body because of the damage that was created that killed the person who used to be here. Because I like to say people don't just die from nothing, they die from something. Now, in my subsequent years, like since I've come here, I didn't used to know that not everybody had a walk-in experience like I did. I thought everybody died, and everybody died horribly and was tortured and abused and left with tons of neurological damage. I didn't know that some people have a beautiful, seamless, comfortable walking in, where they don't have to not only lose aspects of their body and neurology, but they don't have to have a break in the continuum of their life. But I definitely did. So I've heard that now things have gotten a little bit easier for people to be able to walk in, that first there doesn't have to be an actual literal physical death of the body, that it can be just done by agreement, that there can be a near death. I've heard all of these sorts of things. It's kind of like if you were born with your physical birth under great duress, let's say you never made it to the hospital, born in a cab, like in the Lincoln Tunnel or something like that with the umbilical cord wrapped around your neck. And you think that is just what birth is. It's just what the experience is. And then you find out many years later, no. Some people come out, it's like a jacuzzi, there's music playing, there's aromatherapy. That's a beautiful birth. Okay, so other walk-ins that I've spoken with, in more recent years, I learned that they had a really different experience, really different incoming trajectory experience. But mine was about as torturous and painful and uncomfortable as you could imagine. I was literally tortured by demons. And the being that killed this occupant of this body, so, I'll flip back and forth. It's hard to keep the pronouns straight when you're talking about this, because there was another person, a different ego structure, that was the occupant of this body. And that person who lived as an earthly being died. And that there's no way to sugarcoat that. There's no way to pretend it didn't happen. A literal physical death happened. And she was an incredibly healthy person. She used to walk 10 or 15 miles a day as just normal exercise, hiked all around, didn't take any kind of drugs or stimulants or anything like that, or smoke tobacco, was really a person in the greatest levels of health that it is possible to be, like an athlete. And she was murdered. And I can't stress that enough either, because her life was very unfairly and unceremoniously taken from her with no warning. And I'm happy that she lived her life uncompromisingly, especially the last couple of years of her life she devoted to, going on long hikes and cultivating her spirituality and trying to understand divinity in her own particular way. So it's good. It's kind of like being on a pilgrimage before your life is taken away from you. It was good for her to have that experience. And, she was murdered by a psychic attack. She's not the only person that this has ever happened to. There are a lot of people that have been murdered via psychic attack, and sometimes it just appears as a formerly healthy person that has a stroke or an aneurysm and suddenly falls down, or sometimes it might appear to be like a neurological problem or like a seizure or something like that. Some people are, not famous. Some people are very well known when it happens. So 2 examples, Bruce Lee. He is one person that this happened to. He was targeted and murdered through psychic attack. And there's also a little 12-year-old girl, she was 12 at the time of her death, who lived in India. This is within the past decade. And she was a software writing prodigy. She was her own particular brand of genius, and she was learning to code and create amazing software programs at a very young age. And she was also murdered in this way. So now everybody has to wake up and understand that there's not only black magic, which is extraterrestrial technology that is used to harm and distort the fabric of space-time and consciousness. There is also extraterrestrial technology that is like a ray gun, for lack of a better term, targeted, directed energy weapons. So on the one hand, you can cast a spell against someone, take a portion of their DNA and use magical implements and use your intent and magical words to try to make events go against them. On the other hand, you can just take a freaking ray gun and aim it at someone and disrupt not only their genes, but also their neurological functioning and also their timelines and also their non-physical body of possibilities and probabilities. It's like being shot with a bullet from a regular gun, except it's an exotic, high-tech gun. So, wow, the wonderful privilege of being killed by exotic, high-tech weaponry. It's not that really great. So the woman who used to have this body was killed by that type of weaponry. And it created a couple of things. On the physical sense, it created harm and disruption to the cellular structure of the brain and the neurology of this body. And it was a type of anoxic brain injury, not the type of stroke where blood comes pouring out of a blood vessel and causes, disruption because of blood leaking out. It's the type of stroke where blood vessels are closed down and they do not carry blood and vital oxygen to parts of the brain for however much amount of time, and it causes brain injury. Like the cells die because they don't get food and oxygen and they cannot function any longer. So that is the type of brain injury that this attack created in this body. And I'm really not going to relive right now and go into the memories on air. It is too much, and I have to tell you that it's just like being in a war or having a traumatic rape event or being in a car accident, and maybe it's kind of like tying all those 3 experiences together. It's very difficult for me to access the memories of what actually happened, and the memories themselves are not in order, like first this, then this happened. The memories are all jumbled up, and often when I would even try to access the memories, or when I would slide into them, it would cause a seizure or neurological disruption from just because of the emotion, of the unprocessed emotion of accessing those events. So I really I don't have a lot of answers that I would like to have about exactly what happened. And when people used to ask me questions, it was very difficult. Like, I didn't have answers. I didn't know. And now I am more self-aware and I know more of what happened. Like, I know that the being that attacked me was literally Satan. They were and are a satanic being that is like the pure distillation of evil or malevolence or anti-intelligence and anti-awareness. And the whole reason why this person and this body was targeted in that way is because there was a potential here in this life to change and improve things. If the life trajectory of the previous occupant of this body hadn't been unceremoniously cut short, she would have learned all sorts of things. She would have created artwork and writings and teachings and shared ideas different than what I share, because she wouldn't have had the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, but she still would have shared a lot of things that were not part of the agenda of the supreme epitome of malevolence. So that supreme epitome said, I'm going to wipe this person out of reality, out of existence. And with everyone else that supreme malevolent being has done that to, everyone else that's been targeted, they either died or they were corrupted, co-opted, taken over, no longer able to express their own will and their own personality and persona and divinity through their body and their personality. Now they were like co-opted like a marionette. And I speak about this, like what happened at the end of the culture of Atlantis, how humans were so co-opted and controlled by an artificial Merkaba, like an artificial form of technology that beamed thoughts into people's minds and made them move their arms and legs, so corrupted that they couldn't even think the thought, I am a slave. Well, people who are targeted by this form of satanic weaponry, their neurology gets destroyed, their sense of self gets destroyed, and if they are not just outright killed, if their biology just doesn't completely give up and say, I can no longer support consciousness, what has happened to all the other ones other than me, everyone got taken over, so that they were like a total slave, total mind control marionette slave. And I'm the only one that created the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. When I come on here every week and I speak about the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, I speak about it in its most positive and uplifting sense. And I hardly ever refer to the origins, this moment of where it came from and why it had to be created. Because the options were either to die or to become totally corrupted and totally evil, like the worst evil demon you could possibly imagine, or rewrite the rules of space-time and consciousness. So what I did was I rewrote the rules of space-time and consciousness. I created something impossible. This is also very similar to, if you're a Star Trek fan, if you know about the Kobayashi Maru. This is a story that Captain Kirk, when he was in his Starfleet training regimen at the Starfleet, was subjected to this test that they give different commanders of starships. What are you going to do in a crisis situation? It's called the Kobayashi Maru. You are commanding this vessel. All of these bad, horrible things are happening, and it's called a no-win scenario. And Captain Kirk, he's the only person that ever made it out of this no-win scenario and didn't have his vessel destroyed and all of his crew destroyed and everything in this simulation that they give you for training purposes. And the way that he beat the simulation was by reprogramming it. He went into the program on a basic foundation level and changed the parameters that were available to him so that he could act differently and do something new. And I use that analogy here. All of this is not for purposes of self-aggrandizement to say, I am as great as Captain Kirk. I reprogrammed the cosmos. No. It is to tell you the truth of where the Flying Rainbow Lasagna came from and to give you hope, because this is what is available. I came up with a new option. You can either die or you can become evil and totally corrupt. I came up with a third option. And every time I come on the radio here, I speak about non-duality. Getting beyond thing versus thing. Light versus dark, right eye versus left eye, ego versus the world, even binary, the sense of having either the digit 0 or the digit 1. But what we understand with those two options is that there are two options. Even though the digits are only 0 or 1, there are two options. All of these things, I give you analogies so that you can break out of the flat plane, get out of your two-dimensional existence, get into higher levels of reality by understanding there's a third option. So what I did was I created a third option that is called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And I created it under such extreme duress. I don't even have words to describe what the experience was like. But if you can imagine being blown apart in a battle and having your innards spread out everywhere, and everyone around you is dying at the same time, and then you create something that is literally a miracle that's never been created before, that allows everything in the battle to change, everything in your life to change. And I remember very clearly, creating the Flying Rainbow Lasagna spontaneously, and I remember being given the opportunity to name it, like imagine, this crazy party going on, and all of a sudden someone takes the needle off the record, like, and everything is dead silent, and they say, you get to name it, and I say, it's a Flying Rainbow Lasagna, and then everything gets back on, the record turns back on, the fight resumes again. That is exactly what it was like. And I've also spoken to you about how only a force field of grace kept this body from dying. When you die, you die. There's really no getting around that. The previous occupant, or the narrative structure, the ego, the story that held this body together on a cellular level, that person was destroyed and went and is no longer in existence. And you must forgive me when people ask me, what happened to the previous occupant? Where is she? Is she okay? I love that you all care about her. And most of the time, I just really sugarcoat it and I say, yeah, she's at peace and everything is fine. The real answer is she was utterly destroyed. Everything about her ego was unmade, like on a molecular level, like a sweater that is unfurled. You pull out all of the little stitches that knit together that sweater, and that sweater cannot be called a sweater anymore. In this broadcast, I'm just not giving you any kind of a runaround, and I'm just telling you as bleakly, as truthfully, that is what happened. And there were aspects of herself, of her narrative structure, that were not resolved, that stayed around like reverberations for about the first 18 months. And they were mostly dense emotions. There was a lot of rage and anger and sorrow, not only at being murdered, because when people are murdered, when people die violently, especially when you're young or healthy, it's like your life is stolen from you. Anger is appropriate. And then she also needed to have resolved various life experiences that had left a residue, traumatic experiences and sexual abuse and other things that literally left an imprint on the genetic structure of this body and on the physical cellular structure of this body. So for me to be in this body, what I had to do was, I call it cleaning up or dirty laundry. I had to do a lot of rectifying and cleaning up loose ends, tidying up from what she had experienced. And when I completed that, then it's like the reverberations of the ringing of her bell, of her ego, they could all be at peace. They're not reverberating anymore. She's not suffering. She doesn't have anger and sadness and sorrow and rage and jealousy and all of those feelings. She's at peace. And I don't want you to think that she's sitting on a cloud strumming a harp or any of those visualizations of what people think happens after you die. That is not the experience. And again, I'm not sugarcoating it here on this broadcast. And I want to tell you a little bit more about that force field of grace that held this body together, because I do remember that also very vividly, being wrapped up almost like a mummy, and also having every cell of my body held together with this thread of white light, of godly awareness that sewed together all of the cells of this body so that it didn't just fall apart and decompose, so that I could actually be built. And I, who is addressing you now, is Aurora. So let me lay it down and just say it for you. I, Aurora, am a constructed personality. It doesn't mean I'm not real. It doesn't mean I don't have feelings. I am real and I have feelings. I am an intentionally constructed persona, and personality or narrative structure or sense of self. So again, artifice and artificial, these do not mean evil. I am not a bad person. I'm not a malevolent being. It's more like saying everything that was here was destroyed, and so in order for me to even be here, something new had to be built. And mostly people's egos and sense of self arise in a natural progression, like in infancy. You have experiences, you learn who you are, you learn your name, you learn your likes and your dislikes, and you develop your characteristics and your sense of self as you move through life. And my personality and my characteristics and my sense of self were all constructed. Even though I did a lot of learning about human culture in the first couple of years that I was here, Aurora is a created person. And so I, again, do not want you to misinterpret me. I don't want you to think that I myself am evil. I don't want you to think that I have been co-opted by malevolence or ignorance or lack of awareness, and that I am here sharing information that's not true, because that's what happens. People get co-opted, and then their mouths are not their own, and their ideas are not their own, and they go around sharing a lot of lies as if they're truth. And I really hope that people that have been listening to my broadcasts for any amount of time or seen any of my videos, that you really sense, oh my goodness, sorry about that little technical issue. I really hope that you can sense how much I attempt to tell the truth with my words, to really choose my words carefully, to be truthful, to share only what is impeccable. When I say impeccable, that word, it means without sin. Literally, a peccadillo. This is like a little sin, something that doesn't really matter. Impeccable with words. It means really being in integrity. Really, the words that I choose matching my heart and my intention on a non-physical, non-verbal level. And I share this information not to take prisoners. I'm not here to collect followers or change people's minds or have you celebrate me and say, Aurora, she is so great. Let's, like give her energy like a rock star. None of that is my intention, although if you want to celebrate me, that's awesome. My intention is to share with you this innovation that I created, the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And the whole idea of doing it through artwork and through visual arts and sculpture and animations and making it joyous and artistic and lighthearted. This is all about like giving you tools in your toolbox so that when you face malevolence, you don't have to be alone, you don't have to be subverted, that you can be powerful and empowered. That I'm really telling you, it's like I developed the antidote. I was exposed to the disease. The disease is pure evil. It is malevolence on a grand scale. Can't even describe it with words. I was exposed to that disease, and I created an antibody. The antibody is the shape called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. It's a very lighthearted name for a shape that is profoundly significant. I know, I later tried to come up with something much more scientific sounding, thinking that people would take it more seriously. I couldn't think of what would we call this thing. It is a puzzle piece, or it is the answer to how you can die without dying, to how you can resolve duality, to how you cannot be corrupted by evil. And when I made it, when I experienced it, I really made a conscious choice to come into the physical body and share it with humanity and with Earth's, dwellers directly. Because what I could have done is just transcended. Like, get the F out of here. Transcend the physical plane and go somewhere else. And the idea of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna would still have been available to everyone in the cosmos. Just like the idea of, like washing your food before you eat it, or, any basic concept. The idea of a square, the idea of a triangle. It would have been an idea that existed, that many people could have and would have eventually come to this discovery and applied it to their lives. And I said in my own experience that that's not enough, that I really wanted to come here in the flesh, in person, and tell people about the Flying Rainbow Lasagna and share it with you directly, kind of like making sure that it gets out there in the right way. It doesn't get lost in the shuffle. I really wanted to make sure that everyone knew about it and knew what it was and knew how significant it was and how helpful it could be. And that was literally a choice that I made that made me, Aurora, the person who is now addressing you, exist in this body. That I chose to be in this body, and I chose to share the concept of the flying rainbow lasagna from this first-person vantage point. So when this body was killed, it left all sorts of neurological damage and distortions. And when I came into this body, and I use the analogy, it's like not only are you moving into a home, it's a furnished home, like with all the possessions of the previous person who used to live there, but the house also had a house fire. And the parts of the house that were burned down, or the parts of the neurology that were harmed in my body, are the eyesight. So the previous person who had this body only had to wear glasses, for driving at night or, seeing something far away, like a street sign or something like that, and had -2 diopters. And overnight, when I came into this body, because of the neurological disruption, lost 2 diopters. So the eyesight became -4 diopters, which is definitely too much of a distortion to be able to go without glasses. However, for the first 3 or 4 years that I was in this body, I didn't have glasses. And so I really had the experience, like many infants do, of undifferentiated eyesight and not really being able to see my environment clearly. And here's the big one, not being able to see people's faces and facial expressions, because socially that makes it very difficult to navigate. Cannot tell who you're speaking to or what their feedback is in terms of what you're saying to them. So it was a big deal for me to get corrective glasses, corrective contact lenses, and then really be able to see the world clearly. And the math skills of this house or this neurology had also been totally obliterated. So, in the brain, not only was there lack of oxygen to certain parts of the brain, but there was overloading of energy. You could think of it like if you put too much electricity through a copper wire and it melted the wire. That's what happened to some areas of the brain. They were burned out through excessive energy. And it created a scar. And so I deal with the artifact, the after effect of having epilepsy, which is the scarred areas of the brain firing in a non-melodious, non-harmonious way and not integrating well with the rest of the brain that is firing in a much nicer way. And the lack of math skills. When I first came into this body, I'm telling you, when I looked at numbers, they all looked the same to me. They all were equally mysterious. They looked to me like hieroglyphics of a foreign language. I couldn't differentiate between the shape of a 3 and an 8 and a 6 and a 9. They all looked roughly the same to me. And it took me, again, about the first 4 or 5 years that I was here on Earth to develop basic math skills and numerical literacy. That was a big one also. I couldn't see people's facial expressions, did not understand human society or the economy or where money comes from or how it is circulated or what you do to get it. And in terms of using money, I did not understand and recognize basic numbers and have the capacity to do addition, subtraction, and multiplication so that I could manipulate those numbers. Again, very much like being a tiny new infant consciousness. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I rehabilitated and learned numbers, because when you look at my artwork now, it might be hard for you to even imagine that I at one point was numerically illiterate. And it's also why I do, sometimes share this information. I don't dwell upon the things that I've lost and upon the difficulties that I have, gone through in order to be where I am right now. So a person who meets me as I am now, 15 years into my journey, you might not understand all of the hurdles that I had to jump over in order to make the artwork that I make. So when you look at my artwork now, you're like, wow, that's pretty mathematical. How does a person do that? And the answer is, first, I couldn't even understand what numbers were. But when I first came into this body, I was drawing patterns obsessively. And the patterns that I was drawing, I just got notebooks and I would draw and draw and draw. It was a way for me to organize my neurological structure, and it was a way for me to express the truth that I knew on a deep inner level. But I didn't have the numbers. All of that is human. all of that is based in earthly society. I had the abstraction, the abstract understanding of it, the cosmic understanding of it, but not the vocabulary and structure to express it in this time and place. So it wasn't until I got a job at an art supply store. This is like maybe 4 years after I came into this body. And, miraculously got a job even, because when you do not have, basic math skills, it is very difficult to find, work and everything like that. So at this point in my development, the tasks that were well suited to me were things that were very simple, like placing items on a shelf. If you work in a retail store, one of the jobs is to unpack whatever new merchandise has come in and then match up the serial numbers on the tags on the new merchandise onto the little, hooks or wherever they go on their display areas in the store. And so that was my task. And through doing that task, I started to learn to recognize numbers, because I had to figure out a way to match up this, little pen set to where it was supposed to go on the shelf so that it had the right price on it. And what I started to do was, I would use my eyes and compare visually the look of the numbers, and I would sing the sound of the numbers to myself, like 626, 938, and then I would look at the shelf and I would look for 626, 938, and it's because music is a way for me to bypass the damaged areas of neurology in this body. So I started to rehab, I started to learn numbers, and then eventually, again, I still had no basic math skills, I talked my way into a job in the custom framing department of this little art supply store that I was working in, which is, again, another miracle. First, I had applied with a paper application, which they promptly dismissed. I had no experience, et cetera, et cetera. They hired this other guy. I'll tell you, his name was Bill. We won't give his last name, but Bad Bill. They hired Bill, and Bill not only was late to work all the time, totally messed up all of the orders that he took, and then eventually stopped showing up for work. And I approached the supervisor, and I said, look, I really need this job. I can't be any worse than Bill. Just give me a chance. And the supervisor kind of looked me up and down and was like, okay, let's test you out. Just cut this mat to these dimensions over here. And I looked at it, and I'm like, I had no idea how to get started. I didn't even know what a tape measure was. And I said to him, well, why don't you give me the tutorial? I really learned how to act tough in this world. That was a big part of human socialization. Like, don't take no for an answer, just bluster your way on through. So this supervisor actually had to show me on a ruler what an inch was. And when he first showed me the ruler and showed me 12 inches, that lit up all sorts of neurological bells and lights. I was like, oh, I could understand numbers getting bigger as the ruler gets longer. And then he showed me an inch, and he showed me half an inch, and a quarter of an inch, and a 16th of an inch, and I understood. And when things get smaller, then the numbers get smaller. And that was the beginning of me rewiring this brain and developing a visual understanding of math. So at that job, I eventually developed a way of visualizing packets of 10 that could be divided up into packets of 5, and they don't look like numbers. I'm not using Arabic numerals in order to do this in my brain, but I found ways to visualize, like what I saw on the ruler coming together. And this journey took, a couple of years. I left that job and I worked at several subsequent places doing custom framing. And at each place, my math skills got better. The more that I used them, just like a muscle and exercising, the more that I did them, the better that I became understanding. It was all practical math, applying a number to something very visual that I could look at. So hopefully now you're starting to understand that I tend to be very visually oriented in anything that I could relate to, either a picture or, music that I could begin to comprehend. And eventually, now let's say like 5 or 6 years after that initial position at that starting place, I was running a department in custom framing, and I used to work with customers all the time. And I would do like a little estimate, if you do this framing job, get this frame and this mat and this glass and this labor is all going to cost you this much, so that they don't get sticker shock. And at that point, when I was doing the adding up of all the different items on their list, I realized that I could actually added up in my mind faster using my visualization method, visualizing these packets of numbers coming together, than if I actually took the time to plonk the numbers into the calculator and do it in that way. And when I had that realization, I understood that I had really, climbed a huge mountain and, surmounted a huge obstacle. And that was the beginning of when I started to go to math art conferences. I started to take the artwork that I was making, which was now becoming much more based in formal geometry and not just based in intuitive shapes and I used to not measure. I used to do everything freehand and not measure. And then I learned I could only make a certain level of perfection by doing that. If I wanted to go further, I would have to actually learn the math and actually learn how to measure it. So as I started to do that, I self-educated a lot. I got a lot of books about geometry, and I taught myself all about it. I also went to these math and art conferences where I would show my artwork to these highly trained mathematicians, and they would say something like, I see, you're working with the Mobius transformation, or you're working with Apollonian packing. And I would nod sagaciously and say, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing, pretending. And I would write down these little words that I had to go home and research, and then I would go home and self-educate. And that happened when someone first saw my artwork at one of the most early group shows I was at. They said, oh, you're painting harmonics. I didn't even know what the word harmonics meant. And I share all of this with you so that you can really see how long my journey has been in order to get to the level of awareness that I'm presently at. So it took a very long time for me to understand numbers and for me to become mathematically literate. It took a long time for me to be trained in the earthly mathematical systems of geometry and to have that vocabulary so that I could share my ideas with others. Hey, let's talk about words. Because here I am on the radio every week painting a painting with my voice. However, when I first came into this body, it was not possible for me to speak as I presently do. And this is a big one, because when you first, Aurora, when you came into this body, you should have explained what happened to everyone around you and told them all about your experience and said, I'm a walk-in and this is what happened. I had no capacity to do that. In fact, I had aphasia, which is the inability to choose the right word that you want to choose. Like I'm in my garden right now, you might want to choose the word leaf, but instead you choose the word, pickle. It's not usually it's something much more similar or related, but it's like, just as it took a very long time for me to be able to rehabilitate or grow as if for the first time math skills and numerical literacy, I also had to learn how to express myself verbally and how to choose the right words, how to choose the words that I want to choose, how to use analogies. All of that took many years. And at a certain point, I became better with my verbal skills and I could explain and describe my experience. So now I can describe my internal experience. I can say, I had these feelings. I had this experience. This thing happened to me and it made me feel this way. When I first came here, I was not able to do that. I was able to make complex drawings and show them to people and hope that they would get it and understand what I was pantomiming mutely about. However, I couldn't really explain and describe what I was seeing and perceiving and what I had been through. So it took many, many years of me practicing expressing myself verbally. And so, again, I just kind of jump in and figure things out. At one point, this is like maybe 2005 or 2006, so I'd been here like 4 or 5 years, I got a public access show in Woodstock, New York. It's Channel 23, the motto where anyone can be a star. This is public access. You don't have to audition. You just have to sign up and then you get your own show. So I had my own show called Planet Aurora, which was on in the middle of the night. I thought, no one's watching me. I'm just going to get on this little, local TV station and just talk about my lasagna and the things that are important to me. And through going on that show, and I did it for really several years, every Wednesday night in the middle of the night over there in Woodstock, even in the middle of the winter, I began to be more articulate and I began to be better at describing what the Flying Rainbow Lasagna is and why it's important and what is the significance to you. And I would also do other little segments, like before Ancient Aliens was a show on the History Channel, I would do these little segments about secrets of the Bible and talk about how the Bible is a tale of extraterrestrial, interaction from a long time ago. I did a lot of that, laying the framework of changing society, and at the same time was learning to use verbalization and social structure to express myself here. And I also have to tell you, it's a world of difference for me to speak, like, get on TV or get in front of a microphone and speak about things like this than it is for me to sit down at a typewriter, try to type this all out. That is still a huge challenge to me. So I share this with you so that you understand on this journey that, I came from a place of total disruption, like moving into a house that had had a house fire, and now the house has been really fixed up. It's doing a lot better than it, ever was before. Some areas of the house are completely expanded and wonderful, and there are still some things that I still have challenges with, and I'm still working on. So my capacity to write and express myself through, like a typewriter is it's hard. And when I have to do something like create an artist statement, people say for your artwork, like just send us a bio and an artist statement. They might not understand how challenging that is for me. So what I would often do is either do a video or a recording of my voice of what I want to say, and then sit down with headphones and take dictation from myself and write out what I said verbally, and then go in and edit what I said. Because they're literally two different ways of using your brain and your perception and your neurology, the oral versus the written. And I'm still working with the written. And there are still things that, like poetry and things that are artistic expressions through the written word that still sometimes bypass me, or that I don't have the translation capacity to understand. Like sometimes when a person shares their poetry with me or some expression that is verbal, I understand how people feel when they look at my abstract artwork, because sometimes I just don't get it. And that's just part of an artifact from what I've experienced. And I also told you I deal with the epilepsy, which is the artifact of the scars of this brain. And there's also neuroplasticity, which is the capacity for the brain to compensate if you've had damage in a particular area. So basically all the things that, weren't able to be done are now able to be done. And there were even things like muscular motor deficits of some areas of the body, like being able to move some of the limbs of my right side, and the muscles of the right side of my face were inhibited for many years. About a year and a half ago, I worked with a wonderful Reiki master who helped me to connect more fully to the neurology of this body. So for the first time, I could wiggle my right eyebrow, like I could raise it and lower it and, use those muscles on that part of my face. And that was a big life upgrade when you get fully installed in your body. So again, not every walk-in has these challenges. Not every walk-in has to learn, how to relearn or learn for the first time how to move their right eyebrow, how to do math and recognize numbers, how to express themselves verbally. All of this has been, a huge upward climb. And the whole purpose for it has been so that I can do what I'm doing right now on the radio and with my artwork and with my webinars and my videos, is sharing the concept of the flying rainbow lasagna. That satanic being that, killed the former occupant and harmed this body. The idea was first, just kill the person, just kill her so that you can't make any trouble. Then, if she's still going to be alive, just make her a vegetable. That was the idea. That Aurora, or this person that is here, might not even become Aurora, that this person would just be like a lump, a vegetative lump, a person that cannot speak or move or think or do, and just be, like a placeholder. And clearly I'm not that. Clearly I am so much more than that. So that, I'm told you this would be a very personal broadcast, that I don't usually delve in this way. But now you understand how much reconstruction and construction from first principles it has really taken for me to be here and to be sharing the ideas that I share and doing what I do, and even becoming musically literate. That this is even like the journey doesn't stop. I learned math and I became more vocal or adept with my voice. And I love to sing, and now I'm becoming musically literate. I'm learning to read music. I'm learning to play the piano. I've been doing that for like the past 10 years or so. Now I'm learning it much more formally. I'm learning song structure and how to write a song. And I'm forming those, integument connections to be able to express through that form of artistry also. And I'm not afraid to tell you about this. So if you say, Aurora, you're a super being in human form, like, what the heck is wrong with you? Why do you have any kind of health issues or life issues or whatever? So this is, I deal with epilepsy as an artifact of the neurological damage, and it's really quite miraculous that I do all of these things. And part of what makes it possible is high CBD medical cannabis. And for many years back in, I lived on the East Coast in Woodstock, New York, I took anti-epilepsy drugs from the pharmacy. And it was a huge roller coaster. I took all of these, it's like pharmaceutical roulette, tried all of these different molecules, and they all had horrible side effects. And I don't know if you can even imagine what it's like, but it makes you not yourself. It makes you not yourself emotionally or intellectually or in the sensations of your body. And I found that at first I was getting cannabis on the black market because I lived on the East Coast. And then eventually I relocated out here to do work. And I got access to different strains that had, the medical qualities, the anti-epilepsy qualities that I needed. And then eventually I relocated fully and lived here, moved here permanently so that I could not only have CBD medicine, but, accessing it can be quite expensive. I grow my own garden. So even though New York State has gone medical, in order for me to access the medicine there, it would be thousands of dollars each month. It's not a very good program. And out here in California, literally, I'm sitting in my garden. I can grow the plants that I need for the year, have my medicine stored up, make tinctures and other, forms of medicine to ingest it. I do a lot with raw juice, juicing the leaves and drinking it that way. And all of this in order to share with you that I'm in a human body. Like, there's solidarity here. I'm a non-terrestrial energy presence, and I'm here in a human body, and I've had to figure out what is the right food to eat. That's something else I should share a little bit about my journey. When I first came here, I tried to eat nothing but pure sunlight. That was like the first 18 months that I was here. I was in transition. I was still dealing with the previous occupant and her residues, and I thought that I could just eat pure sunlight, and I did not know that that is not adequate energy ingestion for this body and this time and place. And I had to learn about food. And then even when I learned, you got to eat food, I didn't know which food or how to eat it. So just to give you an example, like, I would get up in the morning and just drink like espresso, like a very concentrated black coffee with no milk, no sugar, no nothing in it. And then I didn't understand why I had a stomach ache. And I also had to learn about different food qualities, like if food is processed and it has less life force energy in it. And eventually, at first when I came here, I ate indiscriminately. I ate whatever was placed in front of me. Then I had to learn how that food was having an impact on my body. Then I had to learn what was in food. Then I had to learn what is the right food for this body to eat. So pretty early on, maybe 2006 or so, I learned that sugar induces epileptic seizures and makes all sorts of metabolic changes in the body. So I had to stop eating sugar and stop eating corn syrup. And that meant that I could no longer eat a lot of the processed foods that are available in the society. And that meant I had to start being a lot more conscious and aware about making my own food and what went into ingredients. And that was when I started to become educated about genetically modified ingredients and what was actually in the food supply and being here. There was all a huge education about this time and place. And then even still, I didn't know about things like microbes, your microbiome, what's in your guts, what's in your intestines. I only really learned about that within the past 2 years. So all of this has been a journey of learning how to be in a body. What is the proper care and feeding of a physical human form? I've said this before too, we're in transition. We are not yet at the point where we can all subsist on nothing but pure sunlight. The body is not created that way. It's like we have to change the plumbing on a basic level. So we're in transition. So it requires physical food and light body food, which would be pure sunlight. I'm out here in my garden absorbing and ingesting my pure sunlight, which I do on a daily basis. So, and I've been here about 15 years, and that makes me a teenager. And although my chronological age of this body is definitely older than a teenager, my consciousness and who I am as a person, I very much relate to the feelings of the adolescent who says, screw you, mom and dad, you don't know everything. I'm going to strike out on my own. That rebellious teenage spirit, which is very necessary. Because if teenagers never exhibited that, then we would just have automatons who always follow what the previous generation did, even in totally inappropriate circumstances. And what's going on right now on Earth? We are in uncharted territories. We are submerged in events that no one knows how it's going to go. No one knows. No one has the right answer or a lock on the truth or can say, always do this, never do this. So when I say I'm a rebellious teenager, I have these extraterrestrial guides or higher dimensional family members. And I say to them, you don't know everything. You're like mom and dad. You have feet of clay. You are in a position of power, but you're not perfect beings. You are fallible. You don't know everything. And the main point is we're in a forum or a context right now where it doesn't matter if you know everything from a different world. We're in a new world. And everything that you know from the previous world does not necessarily apply perfectly as a template on the experiences of this world. This is a new world. I call this birth of a new dimension. We are giving birth to a new dimension. This is the coming together of spirit and matter. It's a new level of consciousness. In this new level of consciousness, no one is an expert. Not even extraterrestrials who might have lived for several millennia. So I encourage all of you guys out there, my listening audience of multicellular organic human life, be rebellious teenagers. You know? Don't just listen to someone who seems older and wiser than you and be like, yeah, they told me to do it this way. I'm going to do it just the way they did it. Because you know something? They can be talking out of their ass. They can be totally uninformed. They can be giving you parameters for behavior that apply to like 100 or 200 years ago, but not to what is happening right now. Each one of us needs to think for ourselves. Use your own perception and do what you know is right in your own body. So that's another thing, in this body. I've had to work very hard and fight for sovereignty and establish my own sovereignty, just as all of you are also doing. Sovereignty against any interlopers of consciousness that would like to say, I tell you what to think, I tell you what to speak, I tell you what to do. Like the mind control beings, or like what happened at the end of Atlantis. Any overlords, any religious overlords, like anybody who says, I'm a spirit being, or I'm a religious figure, or I am a non-physical presence, and I'm going to tell you what to do with your physical body. It is good to be rebellious against that, because we are the owner-operators of the physical body, and it is quite miraculous to have a body. What I've been telling you about for the past hour or so here is my experience of walking in and how difficult it was to have this body, and how much I've had to fight in order to be here, to be in the body, and to have the body be healthy. I have no idea, like the idea of uprooting and rearranging my life so that I could relocate from the east coast of USA to west coast of USA so I could legally have these plants in my garden. That was a major disruption. Friends and business opportunities and professional opportunities that were all on the east coast. Like I had to move away from all of that because of, man's laws, humans' laws, not because of the laws of physics. But it's like it has been necessary for me to not compromise. To say, I'm going to reach for the best version of this life that I can have and then fight for it. And I share my journey with you so that you understand and you can apply those characteristics to your own life. Like, don't settle. Don't settle. I could have stayed on the East Coast and kept on taking these pharmacological drugs that made me, instead of a technicolor person, like in black and white. And that would have been a mediocre, sad half existence. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to have a better existence than that. And so I, reached for it and strived for it and created a better existence. So when you hear my voice speaking on the radio, when you watch my webinars, or if you see my artwork, you understand the unlikelihood of any of those things being here in existence. The severe unlikelihood of me, Aurora, even being here and speaking to you. It's literally a miracle that I get to be here. And I am happy and appreciative of it every day. I mean, this has turned into a good celebratory recording, I feel. Every day I usually feel very joyous and uplifted feelings. And I feel the privilege of having my eyes and ears and mouth and being able to see and perceive and speak here and share the ideas that I have inside of me and give lasagna food and lasagna nourishment to other people. I'm very happy and grateful to have my body and to have my life experience. And for as long as I am here, I keep on doing my mission, which is to tell as many people as I can about the flying rainbow lasagna. And at this point, I am not a neurologically disarranged, mute person that just shows words, symbols on a paper. Now I am an articulate and refined person that knows how to navigate human society and has the capacity to express in words and also in artistry and also through music this truth that is a cosmic and profound truth. This world would not be this world if I didn't walk in and create the flying rainbow lasagna. And that's not just hyperbole or self-aggrandizement. It is really saying how important the flying rainbow lasagna is, not just to me, but to Earth, to consciousness, to all of us. And we're all connected in this beautiful sea of consciousness. So thank you to my friends. Thank you to everyone who loves me and gives me energy and helps to sustain me, because we're all connected and we all help to sustain each other. Thank you to people who have given me kind words and who have given me physical resources and physical support. And I ask that you continue to help me to be here, because none of us exists in a vacuum without contextual support. We all have either friends or family or business partners, people that we sell to and buy from, and that we are in a context, in an ecosystem where we all share energy. So thank you so very much for the energy that you send to me, and I send energy and love out to you. And please continue to be with me on this journey as we are giving birth to a new dimension.